Welcome to the Horror Vault. Each week, we open the doors to new nightmares, true horrors, chilling mysteries, and stories that cling to your mind long after the final word. Tonight, I invite you to dim the lights, put on your headphones, and step quietly into a place forgotten by time. Some doors should stay closed, but one woman had the key. This is Ashes of the Asylum. Dr. Elise Harrow had never been one for nostalgia, and yet the letter she held in her hands dripped with it. Yellowed edges, wax seal, her full name handwritten in looping black ink. The envelope had no return address, just a courthouse stamp from Essex County, Massachusetts. Inside, a legal document confirming that Elise, age 39, practicing forensic psychologist based in Boston, was now the sole inheritor of Ravenshade Asylum. She didn't even flinch when she saw the name. She remembered Ravenshade, not in detail, just fragments. An old black and white photo in her grandmother's parlor, a towering structure in the woods with shuttered windows and ivy-covered brick. A vague story about an ancestor who had worked there, and then silence. For decades. She read the letter again. The state had officially condemned the building in 1997, and it had been vacant since. Now, with no known living descendants of the original board of trustees, except Elise herself, it fell to her. She had inherited not just the land, but all contents within. She stared at the photo included in the envelope. It was recent. The asylum loomed like a dying beast against the grey sky, its Gothic spires crumbling, bars on the windows, weeds strangling the perimeter, a faded sign, tilted at an angle. Ravenshade Institution for the criminally insane. Elise should have thrown the whole thing away, but something gnawed at her. The same thing that kept her up at night. The same thing that made her overwork, overthink, and overanalyze. Her need for answers, for closure, for control. Within the next 48 hours, she was on the road. A dusty rental car, 2 bags in the trunk, 1 flashlight, 1 recorder, and a key, a large rusted iron thing that felt too cold for the July heat. The road to Ravenshade was narrow and cruel. 30 miles outside Boston, the trees grew closer together, thicker and darker. Civilization peeled away. Gas stations became rare. Cell signal dropped to 0. The GPS died. She followed the directions printed in the letter. And there it was. The gate, wrought iron, bent in the middle, padlock broken. The gravel path beyond was overgrown and littered with fallen branches. She parked, stepped out. The air was still. Elise stood at the base of the drive and looked up. The asylum loomed at the hilltop, 4 stories tall, black bricked, slate roof jagged with missing tiles, ivy devouring its sides, no lights, no signs of life. But she felt it watching her. She didn't believe in ghosts, but she believed in trauma, in memory, in what places could absorb, and Ravenshade had seen its share. Inside, the air was thick and damp. The entrance hall was massive, flanked by twin staircases that curled into darkness, peeling paint, mold along the ceiling, broken tiles underfoot. She turned on her flashlight. The beam sliced through the gloom. Old portraits lined the hallway. Former doctors, administrators, a few patients. She paused at one. The nameplate read, Dr. Miriam H. Harrow. Director, 1949 to 1972. Her great-aunt. Elise had never heard of her. Her light flickered. And somewhere, far down the corridor, she heard a door creak open. She was supposed to be alone. She gripped the flashlight tighter. Then something crackled in her bag. The recorder. It was on, and playing something, a voice, her own. The patient claimed to see the faces in the walls. When asked to describe them, she simply repeated one phrase. "They're wearing mine." She hadn't recorded that. Not yet. Elise froze, heart hammering in her chest. The hallway stretched in both directions like a yawning mouth, shadows breathing along the cracked walls. She turned off the recorder, but the sound didn't stop. It echoed faintly, as if the asylum itself had memorized her voice. She followed the sound, deeper into the dark. The corridor twisted slightly, left, then down 2 steps, the floor sagging in the middle. She passed a shattered window where vines curled through the cracks, drinking the stale air inside. At the far end was a heavy wooden door, marked Administration. The door groaned open with a dry, rasping cry. She stepped inside. Rows of metal filing cabinets stood like soldiers in the gloom, their drawers half open, documents spilling out in yellowed waves. Cobwebs crowned every corner. On the far wall hung a rusted clock, its hands frozen at 2:17. In the center of the room sat a single tape recorder on a desk. Not hers. She walked toward it slowly, her footsteps muffled by the mildew-thick carpet. The machine clicked and began to play. "Elise," said a voice. Not hers, not exactly, but close. The tone was calm, clinical, yet distant, like someone reading a case file about themselves. "You must remember. You left this for you, to remind you before it happens again." Again. She backed away from the desk, knocking into a file cabinet. It clanged. She turned to leave and nearly screamed. A figure stood in the doorway, a woman, pale, hair pinned up, a faded white coat, eyes blank as milk. Dr. Miriam Harrow. Elise blinked, and the hallway was empty. She ran, back through the corridor, down the stairs, out into the open hall. But something had changed. The portraits were gone. The air was colder. Her flashlight flickered again. When it steadied, she looked down and saw footprints. Bare, damp prints leading away from her, around a corner, and a voice. "You're not here to inherit. You're here to return." Elise swallowed hard. The asylum wasn't just haunted. It remembered her, and worse, it expected her. She steadied herself, forcing her breath to slow, counting each inhale and exhale like a metronome to drown out the building tension in her chest. It wasn't working. "Return," she whispered to herself. "What does that mean?" Her voice was the only thing she had to remind her she was still grounded in reality, if this was still reality. As she walked forward, every step sounded like it echoed louder than it should have. The corridor seemed longer now, stretched, like the building was subtly shifting, guiding her somewhere. She rounded a corner and stopped. A row of patient doors, each one labeled, each with a small sliding window near the top. Elise's eyes swept over the names, some familiar from textbooks, case studies, old medical journals, and one that stopped her cold. "Harrow, Elise." "No," she muttered. "That's not possible." She stepped toward the door. The rusted handle resisted her touch, but she forced it open. Inside, a single bed bolted to the wall, a narrow window painted over, a desk with a recorder, and lining the wall, photographs, dozens of them, all of her, at different ages. Some were stills from her childhood, others recent. One was from just 2 weeks ago, in her office at the university. She stepped back, her head spinning. Then she saw it. In the far corner, a mirror. Her reflection stared back at her, but didn't mimic her movements. It stood still, watching. Its mouth slowly opened. "Elise," it said, "we need to finish the work." She turned and fled the room, slamming the door behind her. Her palms were slick with sweat. Down the hall again, turning, twisting. The building was no longer just a place. It was a labyrinth, a living mind, and she was inside it, not as a guest, as a memory. A chill crept into her spine. She moved faster now, not out of panic, but from a strange sense of inevitability, as though she were being pulled by something older than fear. A hum throbbed through the floorboards, rising and falling like a heartbeat. She descended a stairwell she didn't remember passing before. The walls grew narrower, the lights dimmer. At the bottom was a steel door with a viewing slit, secure holding. The lock was broken, the door ajar. She stepped in. Low, buzzing fluorescent lights flickered above. The cells here were different, lined with rubber, observation windows shattered. One room was open. Inside was a mural, drawn entirely in what looked like dried blood and charcoal. It depicted a human brain cracking open like an egg. From it, a tree grew, its roots reaching deep into a pit, where faces screamed, silent and eyeless. She turned to leave. A figure stood at the far end of the hall. This time, Elise didn't blink. It was her, dressed in the same clothes, standing, staring back. But her eyes were gone. The doppelganger raised a hand and pointed to the wall behind her. Another message, scrawled in the same dark material. "You never left." And Elise finally understood. This wasn't about inheritance. It was about release, or imprisonment, or both. The scream she didn't let out echoed anyway, a phantom reverberation Elise felt rather than heard. She backed away from the sight of herself, but the doppelganger stood unmoving, arms still raised, pointing to that awful truth. You never left. Her legs finally obeyed. She turned and fled, her feet pounding the tile in a panicked rhythm. But every corner she turned now looked the same. The asylum had folded in on itself, erasing familiar paths. It didn't want her to leave. At a stairwell landing, she collapsed onto the steps, trying to steady her breathing. The walls were weeping moisture. Her recorder buzzed again, crackling. Patient exhibits increasing delusional overlap with case histories from 1962 and 1974. Subject identifies as Elise Harrow, though records indicate this is a clinical projection adopted to replace original trauma identity. She hurled the device down the stairwell. Silence. Then, a soft voice behind her. "You were never a visitor." Elise turned slowly. It was Miriam again, or what was left of her. The figure wore the white coat, but its body was bloated and rotted in places, like it had been pulled from water. Her mouth barely moved when she spoke. "You came back because you belonged to the work." "What work?" Elise shouted. But the hallway had shifted again. Miriam was gone. In her place stood a door, clean, wooden, polished. Dr. Miriam Harrow, Chief Psychiatric Evaluator. She pushed it open. A replica of her old office. Desk, bookshelves, diplomas, coffee mug, photos of her old colleagues. But the air was wrong, and every book on the shelf bore her name as the author, even ones she'd never written. She sat, and in that moment, the truth began to crawl out from under the layers of rot. The asylum hadn't taken her. It had kept her. A part of her, her mind, her trauma, her fear, had never left. Elise had built her life on top of this place, denying it, forgetting it. But it was always there, waiting, preserved. Now she was here in full, and the asylum was finishing what it started. A final journal lay on the desk. She opened it. One line, written over and over. I am the keeper of the keys. She looked to the floor. The iron key, the same one that brought her here, lay at her feet. It was no longer rusted. It gleamed. And in the polished reflection, her eyes were white. She blinked once. The asylum exhaled, and the door behind her closed.